Please welcome Mr. Neil Clifford.
Good morning. Might grab a drink. Obviously, I'm very excited to be here. I thank Hampshire Chamber of Commerce for inviting me. In fact, I blame my mother. She was the one that I think called the Portsmouth Evening News when we were opening our store in Gunwharf to, as mothers do, be your personal PR and tell them all about me and what I've done and blah, blah, blah. And then off the back of that, I think Jane called me and said, would I like to come along? So it's my mother's fault I'm here, in fact. Yes, I am a Portsmouth lad. Need to get my little thing. Tell you a little bit about me. Who's heard of Kurt Geiger, by the way? Probably the women in the room, right? Good. I'm told I have to press this, then the man up there changed it. Okay. This is all true, by the way, including the very impressive 1R O-level in 1983. I was desperate to leave school, frankly. I didn't particularly enjoy school, which is not a particularly positive thing to say, but one is truthful in these things. Actually, I've been back to Mayfield School recently, and in a very small way contributed. I've helped build their new canteen. The £215 million, by the way, wasn't all mine. Nowhere near all mine. But nevertheless, I participate in Mayfield School. I started in '83, which was a terrible time for the economy, actually. If I look back, it was quite similar to where we are, frankly, in terms of unemployment, economic growth, a Conservative party that was in a bit of turmoil in terms of how to get growth. And therefore, I remember going to the Portsmouth Job Centre, and there was about 3 cards, all crappy jobs, frankly. And I had the choice to take a job, which was on the YTS scheme, £25 a week, or get unemployment benefit, which I think was 18 quid a week. And my mother said, you must be bloody joking if you're going to sign on the dole, get yourself a job. So I signed up with Amberley Stores, which is still there, actually, as a man delivering gas bottles, which, frankly, was brilliant. I had 2 years working, pricing hardware goods, cutting keys, delivering gas bottles. It was a right laugh, basically. But it was dirty and horrible and delivering paraffin, and I didn't particularly like getting my hands dirty, so I was desperate to sort of be in the fashion trade. So I applied for a job in Devon as a Southsea, which is frankly still there, just. Not many customers. And went to work for what was called Principals at the time, on £40 a week, which was like mega impressive, going from 25 quid a week. I then, the big break I had, if you want to say that, is the manager in the Guildford branch was off sick, so I had to travel up to Guildford. And I met a guy called Ralph Halpin. If anyone probably remembers the front page of The Sun, which he was known as the 3 times a night man. He was the head of what was called the Burton Group. And I sold him a suit on a Saturday in about 1985. And he said, you sound like a lad that wants to get on. What do you want to do with yourself? And I said, frankly, I want to earn loads of money. I want to get on. I live in Portsmouth, but I move anywhere you want. And he said, well, I'll get someone to ring you. And someone rang me on the Monday and said, if you move to London, there's plenty of management jobs to run shops in London, of which I did. I applied for a job. I was the only man to apply for the job in a place called Woolwich, which actually isn't London at all. But at the time, I thought it was London. I was moving up to the, Mayfair and living in Kensington. In fact, Woolwich is an absolute pit, frankly. I lived in a bedsit in Woolwich for about a year. Dreadful place. 10% stock loss, threatened with syringes of blood and guns and all sorts for shoplifters. This is all true. But nevertheless, I'd made my move, and I suddenly started to discover there was a bigger world out there. And frankly, for retail, London is the place, I suppose. I had numerous store management jobs. I was lucky to be off the back of what was boom time in London through 87, 88, 89, and got promoted at a very early age into what was a head office role. And frankly, this was one of my, this move to head office thing is actually my only real love, apart from my kids, is cars. And I got my first company car at the age of 26, which I just thought I was a complete and utter legend at this point, a Renault 5 Turbo, which was just brilliant. I was still living, bizarrely, I'd moved back to Portsmouth because of the whole sort of mates, Fifth Avenue, nightclub scene of Pompey, which is frankly almost all been knocked down now, sadly. So I was travelling from Portsmouth, this is later in my learns, travelling from Portsmouth at 4:45 in the morning, picking up my mate who's from Winchester. Actually, he's a much bigger, smarter retailer than me, a guy called Paul Sweetenham, who runs TK Maxx. If anyone knows TK Maxx, which hopefully you all do, he doesn't live in Winchester anymore, but he lived in Winchester just behind the cathedral. So I used to get to Winchester at 5 a.m. We used to drive into Oxford Street, do a whole day's work, drive back to Winchester, pick up my car and drive back to Portsmouth. And we did that for 3 years. I then became a hippie for 2 years with my now wife, and we decided to get out of the rat race because we wanted to see the world. And we wanted to do that before we became really successful. So we backpacked around the world and did the whole across America, across Indonesia, across India, all that sort of thing. I came back in '95 very poor and got a job at Kurt Geiger. Lucky to get a job at Kurt Geiger at that point. I won't bore you with those 7 years, but I became MD, I think, in 2000. I then moved to Switzerland on the basis of this thing called private equity, and I didn't really know much about private equity, but at the time it was a new thing. I was reading about it. You could become a millionaire and a billionaire, and there's loads of money, and I thought, well, I'm going to have some of that, actually. So I went and lived in Switzerland and ran Bally, again, for the people in the room that know Bally shoes. I lived in Switzerland for a couple of years. Didn't make loads of money, frankly, because the company was in a much worse state. Came back to Kurt Geiger. It was owned by Mohammed Al-Fayed, so I worked for him for 10 years, the Fayed family, which of course is quite colourful in itself. He persuaded me to come back on the basis that he wanted to sell Kurt Geiger. So I came back as CEO, back to London. My wife stayed in London for 2 years whilst I was gallivanting around Switzerland and everywhere else. And then we bought the company off him finally for £47 million in 2005. And here we are now. So a long way from Mayfield School, but nevertheless, I'm always there, even to the point of still going out in Gunwharf on a Friday night with my friends. Men only get a new friend every decade. I don't know if you've noticed that. Women have loads of new friends all the time and then, frankly, sort of lose half of them on the way. I've still got all the friends that I've had from school and then about 3 more since about 1985. So we're all the same crowd. I think that's quite male. Anyway, what does Kurt Geiger do? We are now quite a big shoe company. We're the 3rd biggest in the UK. And who can name number 1? Fantastic. By far the biggest, £1 billion of turnover. A brilliant company down in Street. Number 2, who can name number 2? It's really difficult, number 2. Don't even know if there's one in, well, there's probably loads in Hampshire somewhere. It's called Shoe Zone, which actually is also a brilliant business. very cheap shoes, but actually a brilliantly run company. And we're number 3. So we're 4 times bigger than Russell and Bromley, 5 times bigger than LK Bennett. Jones the bootmaker's almost bust. So we're sort of bigger than we maybe people know. What do? We've got Kurt Geiger stores. There are 57 of those now in the UK and then 20 around the world. That's 20% of our turnover, this piece. What we actually do is we run most of the shoe departments for all the department stores in the UK. That's our day job, really. So in Harrods, we take £1 million a week on shoes, which it's a big number, actually. A lot of pairs of shoes, lots of expensive shoes. We do the same in Selfridges. We do the same, we run the shoe business in Liberty, most of Debenhams, half of Debenhams, most of House of Fraser. So that's our big job up there, which is all the department stores. And then down here we sell our own brands wholesale, and we have Kurt Geiger stores internationally across the world. So it's sort of 5 chunks, really. We sell our shoes to other people who sell them. That's here. That's very profitable. We have an international department store business. Printemps in Paris. Top tip, don't have a business in France. Open anywhere, frankly, apart from France. Anyway, that's maybe retail. Italy, fantastic. Brand Thomas in Ireland is very good too. We have an e-commerce business, which I'll come to, and then all of our department stores. What do we sell? 50% of our company is other people's brands. So that is Prada, it's Gucci, it's Christian Louboutin, it's Church. It's many, many, many brands that we buy from brands and sell them in our department stores. Nine West is a big brand for us, and these are the people that bought us, actually, in a sort of, what a great company, we're going to buy them. So that's what happened about 3 months ago. That's quite boring. That's our own brands. 20% of our business is men's shoes, and obviously, if one looks in people's wardrobes, 80% of the business is in women's shoes. Thank God for women. Men are terribly boring about shoes. Terribly boring. We are quite boring, I suppose. This is the history of Kurt Geiger. The important bits, I suppose, is not much happened for 20 years. Bless Mr. Kurt Geiger, who was a person, a mad Austrian. And then lots has happened, maybe in the last 15 years, I suppose. The key things, we opened our first Kurt Geiger store, or what you see today, about 10, 12 years ago. Barclays Private Equity helped back us as a management team, and maybe if there are any questions around that, I can take later, but that was a key moment, I suppose, where we sold the dream of what the company could be, which was sort of half truth, and at the time, half blag, really. But we managed to do most of what we said. Internet is a massively key, important part of the shoe business, which I'll talk about later. Going international, this was pretty key, to take our brand around the world. We did what's called a secondary buyout. So these guys paid 50 million quid. We doubled the profits, and these guys paid 100 million. This was an important time because I got rid of my mortgage. That was the most important thing that happened here. And then we were bought this year as well by an American company, which is all very exciting.